When you begin to understand the teachings of Neville Goddard, you realize that your life is not shaped by chance, nor by the opinions of others, but by the quiet, persistent beliefs you hold within yourself. Not the beliefs you speak about, not the beliefs you wish you had, but the beliefs you actually live by. Those are the forces that carve your reality. A man may say he desires success, yet if he secretly believes he is unworthy, life will faithfully mirror that hidden conviction. A woman may dream of love, yet if she assumes abandonment, she will unknowingly recreate it again and again. This is the law at work, not as punishment, but as perfect reflection. You are always revealing your true beliefs, not in words, but in reactions. When something unexpected happens, when life challenges you, your automatic response exposes what you truly accept as real. That reaction is your inner state speaking without disguise. Understand this clearly. Your outer world is not the cause, it is the echo. The cause is within you. The world is only rearranging itself to match the story you are telling yourself in silence. If you wish to change your life, you must go beyond surface affirmations and reach the deeper level of assumption. Ask yourself honestly, what do I feel to be true about myself when no one is watching? That answer is your creative power at work. To live differently, you must assume differently. Begin to feel the reality you desire as if it were already yours. Not forcing it, not struggling, but gently occupying that state. When you persist in that inner knowing, the world has no choice but to conform. Do not be concerned with how it will happen. The how belongs to a higher intelligence within you that knows every path. Your role is simple yet profound. Remain faithful to the end feeling. When you think from your wish fulfilled rather than of it, something shifts. You are no longer hoping, you are being. And in that being, life reorganizes itself in ways that may seem mysterious, yet are perfectly natural. Most people try to change circumstances while leaving their inner state untouched. This is why effort often feels exhausting and results temporary. But when you change self, everything else follows effortlessly. You are not here to fight reality, you are here to define it. And definition comes from belief. The beliefs you accept as true become the boundaries of your experience. So begin now. Choose carefully what you accept as real about yourself, not based on past evidence, but based on the future you are willing to claim. Persist in that assumption until it feels natural, until it becomes your new identity. Because once it feels natural, it is done. And when it is done within, it must appear without. To truly grasp what it means that your reality mirrors your inner beliefs, you must begin by looking beyond appearances and into the unseen patterns that govern your life. As taught by Neville Goddard, the world around you is not an independent force acting upon you. It is a reflection, a projection, a shadow cast by the assumptions you hold deep within your consciousness. Every experience you encounter, whether welcomed or resisted, carries the signature of something you have accepted as true. Not necessarily something you deliberately chose, but something you have, over time, come to feel as natural. These beliefs are often subtle, formed through repeated thoughts, emotional impressions, and interpretations of past events. They settle quietly into your identity, becoming so familiar that you no longer question them. And because they feel natural, they express themselves outwardly as your lived reality. Consider how two individuals can walk through similar circumstances and emerge with entirely different experiences. One sees opportunity, the other sees limitation. One expects kindness, the other anticipates rejection. The difference is not in the world they walk through, but in the lens through which they perceive it. That lens is belief. It filters, shapes, and ultimately determines what is noticed, what is ignored, and what is attracted. You may believe that external conditions dictate your inner state, but this is the great illusion. In truth, your inner state is what gives meaning to external conditions. The same event can be interpreted as failure or as redirection, as loss or as preparation. And that interpretation is not random. It arises from what you already believe to be true about yourself and life. If deep within you carry the belief that you are capable, worthy, and supported, you will begin to notice how circumstances align to reinforce that idea. Opportunities seem to appear, people respond differently, and even challenges take on a different tone, feeling more like stepping stones than obstacles. On the other hand, if your underlying belief is that you are limited or undeserving, life will faithfully mirror that assumption, not to harm you, but to remain consistent with the story you are telling yourself. This is why surface-level changes often fail to produce lasting results. You may attempt to change your actions, your environment, or even your words, but if the foundational belief remains unchanged, the outer world will eventually return to reflect that original state. True transformation begins not with what you do, but with what you accept as true. It is important to understand that this mirroring is not immediate in every case, but it is consistent. Just as a seed takes time to grow into a tree, beliefs take time to crystallize into visible experiences. Yet once they do, they appear so natural, so logical, that it is easy to assume they were inevitable. But they were not inevitable, they were created. The power in this realization is immense because it places the creative authority back into your hands. If your reality is a mirror, then changing what is reflected requires changing what stands before it. You do not argue with the reflection, you adjust the source. Begin by becoming aware of the patterns in your life. Notice what repeats, what feels familiar, what seems to follow you no matter where you go. These are not coincidences, they are clues. They point directly to the beliefs you are living by, and once you see them, you are no longer bound by them. You can choose to redefine what feels natural. You can begin to gently adopt new assumptions, ones that align with the life you truly desire. As these new beliefs take root, the mirror will respond, quietly at first, then unmistakably, reflecting back a world that matches your transformed inner state. When you begin to observe your reactions carefully, you uncover a truth that is far more revealing than any words you speak or affirmations you repeat. Your reactions are immediate, unfiltered expressions of what you truly believe, and in that moment, they expose the state you are living from. As emphasized in the teachings of Neville Goddard, it is not what you say in calm, controlled moments that defines you. It is how you respond when life does not go according to plan. A reaction is spontaneous. It happens before logic has time to intervene, before you can reshape it into something more acceptable. And because of this, it is honest. If something small disrupts your day and you immediately feel frustration, impatience, or doubt, that reaction is not caused by the event itself. It is revealing what already exists within you. The outer event simply triggered what was waiting beneath the surface. This is why two people can face the same situation and respond in completely different ways. One may remain calm and centered, while the other becomes overwhelmed or discouraged. The difference lies not in the situation, but in the inner assumptions each person holds. One has accepted stability and trust as natural, while the other may be living in a state of uncertainty or fear. The reaction follows the belief, not the event. You may try to control your reactions externally to appear composed or positive, but suppression is not transformation. True change comes from shifting the inner state so that a different reaction arises naturally. When your beliefs change, your reactions change without effort. What once triggered anxiety may no longer affect you, not because you are forcing control, but because the underlying assumption has been replaced. It is also important to understand that your reactions reinforce your beliefs. Each time you respond in a certain way, you strengthen the pattern behind it. If you consistently react with doubt, you deepen the belief that doubt is justified. If you respond with confidence even in small moments, you begin to build a foundation where confidence feels natural. In this way, reactions are both expressions and reinforcements of your inner state. Becoming aware of your reactions is therefore a powerful practice. It allows you to see clearly what you may have been unaware of. Instead of judging yourself for how you respond, observe it with honesty. Ask yourself, what must I believe for me to react this way? This question shifts your focus from the surface to the source. For example, if you feel overlooked or unappreciated, the reaction itself is pointing toward a deeper assumption about your value. If you feel anxious about the future, it may reflect a belief that you are not supported or that things will not work out in your favor. These insights are not meant to discourage you, but to guide you. They show you exactly where change is needed. Once you recognize the belief behind the reaction, you gain the ability to redefine it. You can begin to consciously assume a new state, one that aligns with the experience you wish to have. As you persist in this new assumption, your reactions will gradually shift. Situations that once disturbed you will lose their intensity, and new responses will emerge naturally, reflecting your updated inner world. In this way, your reactions become a compass, pointing you toward your true assumptions and guiding you toward transformation. To understand that the world is an echo and not the cause, is to step into a completely different way of seeing life. Most people move through their days believing that what happens outside of them is shaping how they feel, what they believe, and ultimately what they become. But as taught by Neville Goddard, this perspective is reversed. The outer world is not the origin, it is the response. It is the echo of something already set in motion within you. An echo does not begin a sound, it follows it. It repeats, it reflects, it confirms what has already been expressed. In the same way, your external experiences are reflecting the assumptions, feelings, and inner conversations you consistently entertain. When you see something in your world, you are not witnessing the beginning of a process, you are witnessing the continuation of one that started within your own consciousness. This understanding removes the tendency to blame circumstances, people, or conditions for your current state. It challenges the deeply rooted habit of saying, "This happened, therefore I feel this way," and replaces it with a more accurate awareness, "I have been feeling and assuming a certain way, therefore this has appeared." The shift may seem subtle, but it carries profound implications. It moves you from being a passive observer of life to an active participant in its creation. Consider how often people try to fix their lives by changing external factors. They attempt to control outcomes, manipulate situations, or wait for the right opportunity to appear. Yet even when change occurs, it is often temporary because the inner state remains the same. The echo may briefly shift, but it eventually returns to match the original sound. This is why lasting transformation cannot come from the outside. It must begin within. The world, in its role as an echo, is incredibly faithful. It does not judge, delay out of preference, or act randomly. It simply reflects. If you persist in a state of doubt, you will encounter reasons to doubt. If you dwell in confidence and expectation, you will begin to see confirmations of that state. The outer world organizes itself in ways that align with what you consistently assume to be true. This does not mean that every single moment is a direct, immediate reflection, but rather that the overall pattern of your life reveals the dominant state you occupy. Just as an echo may take a moment to return, there can be a delay between the inner assumption and the outer manifestation. However, the connection remains precise and reliable. When you truly accept that the world is an echo, you stop trying to argue with it. You stop reacting as though it has authority over you. Instead, you begin to look inward, recognizing that if something appears undesirable, the solution is not to fight the reflection, but to change the source. You do not shout at an echo to make it different. You change the sound that produced it. This perspective also brings a sense of calm and responsibility. Calm because you no longer feel at the mercy of unpredictable forces, and responsibility because you realize that your inner state matters deeply. Every thought you dwell on, every feeling you accept, contributes to the pattern that will eventually be mirrored back to you. As you become more aware of this, you begin to choose your inner world more deliberately. You start to cultivate assumptions that align with the life you desire, knowing that the echo must follow. And even when the outer world has not yet caught up, you remain steady, understanding that what you see is only the residue of past states, not a limitation on what is to come. In this way, you move from reacting to the echo to consciously creating the sound, knowing that the reflection will inevitably follow. To assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to move beyond wishing, hoping, or waiting, and to enter the state of already being. This is the very heart of what Neville Goddard taught so persistently, that creation is finished, and your role is not to force outcomes into existence, but to align yourself with the version of reality where your desire is already true. Most people approach their desires from a place of lack. They think about what they want, they talk about it, they visualize it as something distant, something separate from who they are right now. But in doing so, they unknowingly reinforce the very gap they are trying to close. They remain in the state of wanting, and the world continues to reflect that state back to them. To assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled means you no longer think of your desire, you think from it. You enter into the emotional and mental state you would naturally occupy if your desire were already a fact. If you desired success, you would not be questioning whether it will happen. You would feel a quiet confidence, a sense of stability, perhaps even a natural expectation of continued growth. If you desired love, you would not be searching or doubting. You would feel secure, valued, and connected. This feeling is not forced excitement or exaggerated emotion. It is often subtle, calm, and deeply natural. It is the feeling of course, rather than I hope. It is the quiet knowing that does not need to announce itself because it feels real within you. You may wonder how to generate this feeling when your current reality seems to contradict it. The key is to understand that the feeling does not come from the outer world. It originates within your imagination and your acceptance. You do not wait for evidence to feel it. You allow the feeling first, and the evidence follows. Imagination plays a central role here, not as fantasy, but as a creative tool. When you imagine a scene that implies your wish is already fulfilled, and you immerse yourself in it with sensory detail and emotional presence, you begin to shift your state. You are no longer observing a possibility, you are experiencing a reality internally. And as you repeat this, it begins to feel familiar, then natural, and eventually true. The challenge is not in creating the feeling once, but in sustaining it. Life may present circumstances that seem to contradict your assumption, but these are simply echoes of previous states. If you react to them and abandon your new feeling, you return to the old pattern. But if you remain faithful to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, even when there is no external confirmation, you are establishing a new foundation. Faith, in this sense, is not blind belief. It is loyalty to the unseen reality you have accepted within yourself. It is the decision to remain in that state regardless of appearances. And this persistence is what allows the inner assumption to solidify. Over time, this assumed feeling begins to influence your thoughts, your reactions, your decisions, and even the way others respond to you. You are not consciously trying to change everything around you. It changes as a natural consequence of who you are being. The shift is organic, often unfolding in ways you could not have predicted. Eventually, what once required conscious effort becomes effortless. The feeling of the wish fulfilled becomes your default state. And when it reaches that point, when it feels completely natural, you no longer question its reality. You simply live from it. And from that state, the outer world must conform, because it can only reflect what you have already accepted as true within. Most people spend their lives trying to rearrange the outer world, believing that if they can just fix the right situation, meet the right person, or reach the right milestone, everything inside them will finally settle. But this approach keeps them in a cycle of temporary change and repeated patterns. As emphasized by Neville Goddard, the real transformation does not begin with circumstances, it begins with self. To change self does not mean altering your personality on the surface or forcing yourself into new behaviors. It means shifting the concept you hold of who you are at the deepest level. It is the identity you silently carry, the assumptions you make about your worth, your abilities, your place in the world. This inner identity is the blueprint from which your experiences are constructed. When you try to change circumstances without changing self, you are working against the very mechanism that creates those circumstances. You may achieve short-term success through effort, discipline, or control. But if your inner state remains rooted in limitation, doubt, or unworthiness, life will gradually reorganize itself to reflect that state again. The result is often frustration, the feeling of taking one step forward and two steps back. But when you change self, circumstances have no choice but to follow. If you begin to see yourself as capable, you will naturally act with more confidence, notice different opportunities, and respond to challenges in a new way. If you accept yourself as worthy of love, you will no longer tolerate relationships that contradict that belief, and you will begin to attract connections that align with your new self-concept. The outer world adjusts, not because you are forcing it, but because it is responding to the shift within you. This change of self is subtle but powerful. It does not require dramatic action. It requires consistent inner alignment. You begin by observing the story you tell about yourself. Do you see yourself as someone who struggles, someone who is overlooked, someone who has to work harder than everyone else? Or do you begin to adopt a new identity, someone who is supported, capable, valued, and naturally aligned with success? The moment you choose a new self-concept, you may not see immediate changes in your surroundings, and this is where many people lose patience. They look back to the outer world for validation, forgetting that the outer world is always a delayed reflection. But if you persist in your new identity, if you continue to think, feel, and act from that state, it will begin to feel familiar. And once it feels natural, it becomes dominant. Changing self also means letting go of the need to control every detail of your environment. When you trust your new identity, you no longer feel the urge to manipulate outcomes. You understand that your role is to remain aligned internally, and the external arrangements will take care of themselves. This brings a sense of ease, a quiet confidence that does not depend on immediate proof. There will be moments when old patterns attempt to reappear, old reactions, old doubts, old interpretations. These are simply remnants of your previous state. They do not define you unless you return to them. Each time you choose your new identity instead, you strengthen it. Each time you refuse to go back to the old story, you make the new one more real. Over time, the change becomes undeniable. Not because you forced the world to change, but because you became someone for whom those new circumstances are natural. What once felt distant begins to feel normal. What once required effort begins to unfold with ease. In this way, changing self is not just a technique, it is the foundation of all lasting transformation. What feels natural to you is far more powerful than what you merely wish were true. Because the mind does not operate on occasional thoughts, it operates on what it accepts as normal. This is why Neville Goddard emphasized the importance of reaching a state where your desire no longer feels like a distant possibility, but a present reality. When something feels natural, it requires no effort to believe it, no effort to defend it, and no effort to maintain it. It simply is. Most people attempt to create change by repeating ideas that still feel foreign to them. They affirm success while feeling uncertain. They imagine abundance while identifying with lack. And they try to convince themselves of something their inner state has not yet accepted. This creates inner conflict. On one hand, there is desire. On the other, there is familiarity. And familiarity almost always wins. Your current reality is not shaped by what you occasionally think, but by what you consistently feel to be true without resistance. If struggle feels natural, you will unconsciously return to it even after moments of progress. If doubt feels normal, you will find ways to question even the good that enters your life. Not because you choose to suffer, but because the mind seeks consistency with what it recognizes as familiar. To change this, you must gently move your desired state from something that feels new into something that feels like you. This does not happen through force, but through repeated inner experience. When you consistently imagine, feel, and accept a new reality, you begin to soften the resistance around it. What once felt unrealistic starts to feel possible, then probable, and eventually obvious. The shift into naturalness is often quiet. There may not be a dramatic moment where everything suddenly clicks. Instead, you may notice that you are no longer questioning your desire in the same way. You are no longer checking constantly for signs. There is a calm assurance, a sense that things are unfolding even if you cannot yet see the full picture. That calmness is the signal that the state is becoming natural. When something becomes natural, your behavior aligns with it automatically. You do not need to force yourself to act confidently. You simply do. You do not need to remind yourself of your worth. You feel it. Your decisions, your reactions, and even your expectations begin to reflect this new state without conscious effort. This is where real change occurs, because it is no longer something you are trying to do. It is something you are being. It is also important to understand that the outer world may take time to fully reflect this new natural state. During this period, it can be tempting to fall back into old thinking, especially when faced with familiar circumstances. But those circumstances are only the lingering effects of your previous assumptions. If you remain loyal to your new feeling, refusing to return to the old state, the external world will eventually adjust. Naturalness is the bridge between imagination and reality. It is the point where what you have been assuming internally feels so real that it no longer requires effort to sustain. And once you reach that point, manifestation is not something you are waiting for. It is something that is already in motion. You are not trying to make something happen. You are allowing what already feels true within you to express itself outwardly. And because the world can only mirror what you consistently accept as real, what feels natural to you must, in time, become your reality.